Hello and welcome to The Legal Question, a podcast by Let's Chat Law. I'm your host, Hannah May, a data privacy solicitor based in London.
And I'm your host, Gabrielle, a pupil barrister based in Leeds.
In case you haven't heard about Let's Chat Law before, we are a CIC, a community interest company, which provides a safe space for honest conversations about a career in law, and we hope to provide a space for aspiring lawyers to be able to ask not so silly questions about their legal careers and how to get into the industry. Since 2020, we have organised online and in-person events for aspiring lawyers all about commercial awareness, application tips, and also career paths. If you'd like to hear more about our journeys and why we started Let's Chat Law, you can listen to the first episode of this podcast series. So, Gabby, we've talked about obviously researching law firms and chambers. When it comes to actually answering the questions that are on the application and putting pen to paper, how do you go about answering the questions, the common ones like why law, why you?
Yeah, so for chambers, there are kind of three main questions. So like, why do you want to be a barrister? Why this chambers? And why you? And why we should pick you? I think then three questions are something that you need to really personalise and make sure that they fit you. There's no generic answer that can go to answering them questions. I think it's important to practice and make sure that you're comfortable with answering the questions. I know that I split mine up into, personal reasons and professional reasons, because I wanted them to know about my personal reasons to becoming a barrister, but also, the professional skills that I wanted to pursue. So, for example, being an advocate and how important advocacy was to me. So that's how I address that question. We recently did a webinar on this. So we did a pupillage application webinar and a pupillage interview webinar where we had great guest speakers talking about this and addressing interview questions. So if you haven't seen that, they are available on YouTube and on our website. So please do check them out. There are also resources available that set out common interview questions and also how to deal with applications. And they're also available on our website. So I would recommend looking at that. My top tip for interviews are practice, practice, practice. I'll repeat it and I'll repeat it again. It's so important to just give things a go, practice answering the questions, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel. And then when people are interviewing you, if they ask you a question and you don't know it, you don't feel as thrown off because you feel like you've got bullet points and points to answer. How would you recommend it? What are your top tips?
I think I love a mind map personally, so especially for the generic questions like why law, why you, why this law firm. I always kind of visualize it on a mind map just because I think you can always link in. It's nice to see if you can link in your experiences because you do have to kind of link back to all those three questions in each of those questions, if that makes sense. So when they're asking why you, like what are your strengths as a candidate, for example, you do still need to link that back to why you'd be a good candidate, a good training solicitor at that law firm. So you've got to kind of link it back as well. But I think just in general, obviously, mind maps, kind of visualizing it if you're a visual learner, often just, drafting from scratch. That sounds so ridiculous, but I was very guilty when I was younger and less experienced of copy and pasting my answers, and often you're always going to slip up because it's just a little bit too easy. But definitely there were a few times when I copied and pasted my application and got the wrong law firm name in my application, which is very embarrassing now. And obviously I think just drafting from scratch really forces you, because you know what your points are, but it really forces you to actually think creatively, and hopefully it means that each time you draft an answer it gets better, because you can kind of vaguely remember what you put last time, but it's always going to improve. And I think also sharing drafts and getting your friends and family and maybe even classmates to proofread your applications is always really useful. Obviously, it's helpful to get people that are in the law, maybe even if that's classmates, it doesn't have to be actual lawyers, to kind of proofread, because they know what law firms might be looking for. But also I would get friends and family like my mum to proofread it, because she has nothing to do with law, she has no idea about the legal industry. But because she's just I guess a layman, a member of the public, if she doesn't understand it, if I'm not being articulate enough for her, then she's not gonna you know, she, like, if she doesn't understand it, then no one else is going to understand it. And I think also another point to remember is that, you know, HR are usually the first events for these applications. So even if you know, if you're going to go in with loads of legalese in your application, an HR person is going to read that and they might not necessarily know everything about that case. So that's something to just bear in mind.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I think also, get your friends and family to do mock interviews with you and practice and ask them questions and get them to ask you questions. Often there might be like a typical question like, how would your friends describe you in 30 words?
Go ask your mum or dad or your
make
friends.
sure you find out from someone how they do that. And, it's kind of utilising your support system. And even if you don't have, friends or family, utilise your university. Often Inns of Courts offer mock interviews. There are a lot of businesses on Instagram that offer mock interviews and give you the opportunity to kind of give it a go.
Mentoring as well, if you have a mentor.
Yeah, definitely, exactly. So reach out to people. I saw someone post on LinkedIn saying that she needed someone to do mock interviews, and I offered to help. And a lot of people were offering to help. So just post on LinkedIn, and someone will will be willing to help.
But yeah, I think also another thing is, as Gabby mentioned about, reaching out to law firms and so on, I think that is also a good thing. It's not a bad thing necessarily to kind of stalk the law firm. And what I did for my law firm is I basically saw what kind of events they were at in the autumn of that year, and I just turned up to all of them and was like, hey, remember me? And it wasn't necessarily to, schmooze HR, but it was just to kind of demonstrate I had a proven interest in the law firm, and I had a proven interest engaging with the law firm and had a good experience, positive experiences interacting with representatives of the law firms, whether that was trainees, partners, and so on. And that kind of hopefully showed a consistent interest, because obviously it can be really hard to differentiate based on their websites and so on. And I think what you've touched upon as well is when you look at people's websites, law firm websites or chambers websites, they often say the same thing, but you can still kind of read between the lines in terms of the prominence that they give, maybe extracurricular things like DEI, pro bono, volunteering, charity work, that can also, be discovered, the values, just by kind of analysing the website, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And then when did you find out about getting a training contract, and how was it for you?
So for me, it was for application cycles. I had actually done the vacation scheme the week before, and then I was in the library doing an essay that I hadn't done for my GDL because I was in the vacation scheme, and I got the call in the library. It was raining. I was outside the library going almost tearing up and crying and being like, thank you so much. So that was good, but I still had 24 hours to submit an essay, so it wasn't great time. A bit distracting, but still, it was very good. It was very good. What about yourself?
I was in McDonald's car park. I'd not been able to sleep the night before, and I said to my partner, can we go get some breakfast? I was obviously extremely nervous, waiting for the phone calls or emails. So we went for, I think it was a sausage and egg McMuffin. Can't go wrong.
Glamorous.
Yes, living my best life. And we sat in the car park, and then I'd got the phone calls and the emails, and just sat and cried. And my partner was crying in the car park. I phoned my dad. My dad was crying at work. So we were all crying, and I can imagine every car that was driving past or parked next to us were thinking, what on earth are they okay?
Yeah, probably going through a tough breakup on Friday morning.
Yeah, so it was very, very emotional, but obviously very grateful, and I think that makes it more like a funnier experience talking about McDonald's car park.
Yeah, they should sponsor you. They should sponsor us for the next episodes.
A little shout out. So what kind of information do you reckon people should be looking for when searching the website or when speaking to people?
I think that really depends on the criteria that you're looking for. So I think we talk about criteria and not doing a scattergun approach, but just to kind of clarify what the criteria actually means, it's, what's important to you, what values are important to you, what you're looking for in terms of a training contract or pupillage experience. So I think that for me, I was looking out for kind of key information like practice areas. I wanted to make sure I was going to a law firm that had international presence. small training contract, a varied training contract as well, because I wasn't super keen on firms that, you know, had compulsory training contract seats, because I knew I probably wasn't going to be a transactional or litigious lawyer, so I kind of wanted to have as much variety as possible. And I think when you look online, I also looked at LinkedIn and, you know, see what kind of social media stuff the firm was putting out, because that also gives a good indication about, you know, if they're kind of maybe progressive or, you know, on the ball in terms of like current affairs topics and like DEI trends and so on. Maybe not DEI trends, DEI values rather. What about yourself?
I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it's just about prioritising what you want out of a chambers. Do you know what you want your practice to look like in the future? Are there any barristers that are currently in chambers that have a similar practice to what you imagine? Do you know, I obviously like doing additional things outside of work, like Let's Chat Law. I wanted to be at a chambers that would allow that to happen, that would support me in that sense, but also that kind of I could see myself progressing in, and I think that's important as well, to find somewhere where you can actually see yourself in the future and make sure that you would fit in well there. So I think that's important. And like I mentioned before, you know, I wanted a chambers that were giving back to people and were understanding that not everyone came from the same type of background, and that was something that was important to me as well.
We actually haven't said this yet, but if you have any questions that you want us to answer in the next podcast series, send them to letschatlaw@gmail.com. And obviously, please do rate us and subscribe to the podcast. We haven't actually said that. Please subscribe. We've only got to episode 6 and we're like, oops. And you can find Let's Chat Law on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and on our website, where you can also sign up to our newsletter. The links will be in the show notes as well. We just want to say thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode and or series. We'd like to say thank you to Betty Maxine Onwuteka, Elif Mutlu, Srinity Murugesan and Josh Gorthop for producing and editing this episode and the rest of them in this series. So thank you very much.